All right, so we'll start off by opening Animate, which hopefully you guys all know how to do by now. All right, and I will open up a new project. Create new. And I'll keep it 1920 by 1080. I'll keep it 24 frames per second. Remember, you can do 12 if you want. I would recommend 24 for this, and that's not just to give you guys something more to do. It's just so you can have a little more freedom. If you decide later on that, oh man, I really wish I would have done 12 frames per second, you can always extend out each one of your keyframes by one and animate on twos, and that will be the same thing. Okay, so here is my animate stage and everything I need for it. So the first thing I'm going to do, create a new layer. I'm just going to rename this one ground. If I can learn how to spell it. There we go. I'm going to name this one arcs. I'm going to make one more. I'll name it all. Okay, so I'm going to make a ground plane, and I'm going to give it a stroke of, let's say, 3. And extend this out. And just like, Photoshop or Illustrator, if you hold down Shift, you'll go at, 45-degree angle increments. So you're not just kind of have some really wonky thing. All right, so I'm going to hit Shift, let go. That doesn't seem like a stroke size of 3. So what I'm going to do is highlight it and then increase my stroke. Maybe we'll see what 11 looks like. It still doesn't seem like much. Oh, I know what the problem is too. My opacity is at 53%. I'm just going to turn that up to 100. And then what I'm going to do is go out maybe 40 frames and insert a new keyframe. And so that will extend this all out and make blank frames from 2 to 39 actually. So now I'm just going to save this. This is fine, and I'm going to lock it. Oh, don't lock all of them. There we go. So now my arcs. So what I'm going to do with my arcs, or what I'm going to do first before I start my ball bounce, is create my arcs that I want to use. So that just means I'm making my motion path. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can use the pen tool. If I click up here and then click down here, I just left clicked. You don't have to left click and drag. And if I click and hold, I can pull out my pen tool and make a nice little arc. And again, if you hold down Shift, you'll get it more 45-degree angle oriented. That looks good. So now I'm still pointed to this spot. So if I go up here and click, it'll kind of make a point from this point right here. But you'll notice that it pulls it down because my Bezier handle right here is still down, or I have 2 Bezier handles on either side of my point. So what I'll do, I just Control Z, undid that. If I hover over this point, you'll see I get this little upside down V underneath my pen tool. If I click on that, it'll get rid of that bottom Bezier handle. And then if I click up here and drag, I can get more kind of solid arc. I'm going to hold Shift and just kind of extend it out a little bit. Remember, click that again and go down here. And there you go. Try and clean that up. And so what I'm doing is just mapping out my ball bounce, my arc. And remember, it has to hit the ground 3 times. So this is 1, 2, and get rid of that. This is 3. So you'll notice that my arcs are kind of looking a little funky. They aren't quite equal on either side. And that's partially because I'm using the pen tool. You do want to pay attention to these arc sizes, and you want them, one, to be equal on both sides, symmetrical. There you go. But you also want them to be consistent. So if this first arc bounces, this arc should be maybe about half of this height. And this next one should be half of the previous height. So you want to account for that, account for kind of gravity. It's over. And you'll notice that you can't really move these points too much like you can in Illustrator. And so I'm really not a big fan of the pen tool. You know, this is one way to do it. What I really like to do is use the circle tool. So I'm going to click on that. I am going to change my fill over here to no fill. And if you look over here, you can't really see anything, but if you look at the top right, you'll hit this little null sign, this white box with the red slash. Click on that. And now I can create a circle. And here's my stroke. It's a stroke size of 11. I'm actually going to turn that down to maybe 4. And that's good. So what I'm going to do is just hold shift and I'll make a regular circle. And then I'm going to hit M, and that is my transform tool. And if I right click, should highlight this. What I'm actually going to do is convert to, well, maybe I won't. I'll just transform. I'll go to free transform. And now I can kind of move it around. I'm going to start right at the center, like the apex of my circle right here. And then I'm just going to shift and drag it out and move it around. Go. You'll notice I use this middle point right here and this middle point right here to match up with the edge of my scene and my ground plane. So I'm going to hit enter. Oops. There you go. Just click off to the side. And now what I'll do is hit E for my eraser. And you can just kind of erase this stuff. There we go. And now I'm going to do the same thing. But make sure you turn your fill off. So, oops. So if you start dragging a portion of it, you'll kind of drag the whole thing. I don't want to do that. So I click, make sure all of it's selected, and then I can kind of drag from there. That's maybe about good. Yeah, that'll work. Hit E and just erase this bottom section. There we go. Let's see. And repeat. And these are going to be smaller and smaller circles each time. And that's actually maybe a little bit too big. What I can do too is select this section, hit M and free transform, and just extend it up a little bit. And if I use my up arrow, kind of move it up. So that might look a little more appropriate for this circle. I'll hit my eraser again. As you can see, I'm not too concerned about this stuff on the edges. It's a little distracting, but it won't, be in the way later. So those are pretty good arches. One more. And I'll make this a smaller circle. So M, and then transform and free select, or free transform. There we go. That's perfect. Ah, damn it. All right, so I have my arc. I am going to get rid of this. It kind of does annoy me. Okay, so I've got my basic arc. It hits the ground plane 3 times, right? This is the path that my ball is going to be following. I tried to make it about appropriate as far as height. Remember, these do need to kind of decrement, become shorter each time. And they should become shorter at a consistent rate. So it looks like maybe this compared to this arc is maybe a little over half. So this should be maybe a little over half, maybe right at half. And this should be maybe a little less than half or right at half. Yeah, maybe this one could go a little bit lower. And if that's annoying you, which that's kind of annoying me, what you can do is grab this point, put it to the bottom center, then you can alter it that way. There we go. That maybe looks a little bit better. Because we're losing momentum as we get smaller and smaller bounces, so it will be increasingly a shorter distance from the ground plane at the highest point. That makes sense? Okay. All right, so this is my arcs. Now what I'm going to do is Control A to select everything in here, because you'll notice that I have this keyframe selected in my arcs. And you'll notice now that it highlights everything. What I'm going to do is turn the opacity down to maybe about 50. I'm going to see what that looks like. And that's pretty good. So I just want something kind of not too distracting. Pretty good. All right. So now I'm going to insert a keyframe right over here again to extend everything out. And now I can begin mapping out my ball's movements. So what I'll do first, and this next step is kind of up to you guys. What I will do is create a symbol. Now I'm going to turn off my stroke color. So it's just going to be the fill. I'm going to create a ball that I think is the right appropriate size. Maybe that's about good. I select on that. Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a symbol out of this ball, so I'm not just using it as is. So if I erase that, then I'm going to put a dot in it. But what I want is just an actual object instead of just like a paint path. So convert to symbol. Again, I'm clicking on it, right-clicking, and convert to symbol. You'll notice that the shortcut is F8. If you have Fs on your keyboard, you can press F8. But I'm going to create a symbol. I'm going to call it my green ball. And now remember, if you go up to your library, you'll see all your symbols. There you go. And I've already made a mistake. I put this on my arcs. Amateur move. But since I've already made a symbol, what I can do is delete it. Because I already had that selected. There you go. Delete it. Select my ball layer and grab this green ball up here. And there we go. And so now I see that I do have something here. All right. So the first place that this ball is going to start, anyone have any idea where?
I would assume off stage to the left.
Very good, Brian. Off stage to the left, right up there. That's just a joke. Okay, so we'll start it right on the path. And we'll start it maybe right about there. That's fine. We'll say that's kind of like the peak of the ball bounce. So you do want to start it in the top left at the peak of whatever kind of curve you're making. Does that make sense? At the peak of its bounce. Yeah. All right, so next what I'm going to do, I don't know exactly how many frames I'm going to have between the ball at its peak to the ball at its lowest point. But what I'm going to do for now is just create a new keyframe at each 5 intervals. So now, next, what I'm going to do is kind of use my pose to pose kind of principle, and I'm going to figure out where my primary keyframes are. So I know that the ball needs to be at the peak of each circle or the peak of each arc. And so I'm going to use that as a keyframe, but I know right here where it makes contact is another keyframe. So from this position, the next primary keyframe is going to be down here at the bottom, making contact. Next is going to be the peak of this second arc, my second contact, third peak, third contact, and my fourth peak. And then I know right here it will be off screen, but only slightly. And so if you're having trouble, which I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, if you're having trouble get it exactly where you need, if it's snapping, you can turn off snapping, but I kind of like it. It's kind of convenient when I'm trying to line it up with these arcs. What you can do though is just use your arrow keys to kind of more fine tune. And what I'm going to try and do is keep the ball right on the edge of that line. There we go. All right. So the next thing I'm going to want to do, if I scrub through here, I have my keyframes, right? And if I play through this, it's going to look really rough, but you can tell that there's some sort of movement. There we go. Hey, that's a start. So the next thing that I'm going to want to do is add some squash to right where the ball hits the ground. And that's going to be at 5, 15, and 25. And maybe I'll go to 35 too, because it is a little visible off screen. So what I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit. I'll hit M for my transform tool. Actually, I think I might be able to here. So hit M, right click, transform and free transform. And since I want my ball right now to be anchored toward the bottom so I can just squash it from the top, I'm going to grab this anchor point, put it at the very bottom. There we go. And now I'm just going to drag it right about there. So this is going to be my first bounce, and my ball is going to have the most force here. So it needs to be squashed the most right here in this section. Now if I go to the next ground position, move this. I'm going to squash it a little bit more, but not quite as extreme as my last one because there's not as much force in this arc. It doesn't start from as high up, and it doesn't reach that terminal velocity or as much kind of speed going down as it did over here. And the same for this section. Slight squash. And here it's going to be even slighter. So I'm just checking to see my squash, how much it is compared to the one previous. So I think it looks pretty good. And maybe this one can be squashed just a little bit more. There we go. So, all right. Oops. All right. So now if we play through here again. So now I'm just putting in my squash. All right. Not bad. Not bad. It'll work for now. So now the next thing I want to do is start kind of figuring out, one, how many frames I need to put between here and where they need to be located. So another thing I can do is kind of go back here on my arcs and hit V to unselect. And what I can do is take a brush. And if I go to my properties, I know this brush is way too big. I'm going to turn my fill to black. I turn my size, maybe a 2 or a 3. I'll do 3. There we go. And what I can do is kind of start marking out my line. Now, just like I did with the pendulum, I kind of want to just figure out, how close these things need to be, how many frames I need between each drawing, or between each, each drawing, each ball bounce, and figure out where my keyframes are. So I already know that I have a keyframe here at these kind of ground points and right at the top of my circle. So what I'll do is kind of go right here and there, and I know that right about there is the center where the ball is. Let's see, did that work? Just make sure I'm drawing on the right side. Okay, yep, looks good. And then my next pinnacle is right about here. And then right here. So what I'm doing, and actually, you know what? Yeah, okay, just making sure those are in the right spot. I'm gonna lock the ball layer just so I don't draw on it on accident. So now I know that I have these points right here, and obviously the ball starts right there. So now what I'm gonna do is start just kind of roughing out where my keyframes are gonna be, or where my frames are gonna be. So I know that as I get from the top, these balls are gonna be really close because it's gonna start slowing out, and then it's gonna start speeding into here. So it's gonna be hitting down. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. I'm just kind of making this up. I'm just trying to extend these out distance-wise. And I know, especially right in this section, that they need to start getting really a lot faster, a lot quicker. So then I'll say maybe right there. Idea to have one more on this end kind of slanted down second. And so as I come back up, remember, these are still going to be really far apart because it's coming up fast, but it's going to be slowing into this position. And so what I can do is start from here and get closer and closer, or start here and get further and further apart. But I'll start up here just to keep it, a linear path. So I know that right from the ground, I want it to be shoot straight up. And whenever I start animating in here, I'll show you guys too. So the first frame from the ground level is going to be up here, and that might seem like a big jump. But if I have my ball, once it makes contact, it needs to shoot back up. And if I have another frame of my ball touching the ground, even if it's the opposite way, like elongated instead of squashed, it's going to look like it's sticking to the ground and not feel right. So from here, I'm just going to start slowly increasing how close my frames are to each other. And I kind of want to just mimic this, especially this top section on the opposite side. So this mimics, these two mimic each other. Maybe this one comes a little bit more over here. And then I'll start drawing this one out a little bit further and a little bit further every time. And then I have my ground impact. Next frame will be right here. So again, I'm just doing the same thing. Does this make sense what I'm doing? I'm kind of mapping this out. I'll add one right here. Now, on the way down, you do want to have your ball make contact. So as an example, I'll just kind of draw this out real quick. You want your ball to kind of touch down, then make contact, and then it's going to shoot up. But this third frame, you do not want your ball to make contact, because then it's going to feel like it's a piece of flubber or some sort of sticky substance that's just kind of hits down, stretches out, and then kind of pulls back up. So having this frame after contact be completely off the ground makes your object feel like an actual bouncing ball. And so that's why I put one on the left side, of the contact closer, and on the right side further. And so now at this point, the ball is going to be really slow because it's losing momentum. And there we go. All right, so I think that's about what I need for now. Saw this. And as I see, it necessary, I'll come back and kind of change some of these frames. So just looking at this now, I will lock my arcs where they are. I'll go back up to my ball layer. I'm going to move this over so I can see. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 frames between this keyframe and this keyframe. So, I mean, it's on 5s right now, but what I'll do is just shift and select between frame 5 and frame 40. 40, right? Yep. Are you guys familiar with the shift click? Okay. If you're not, shift clicking things allows you to select things within that range. So you click once somewhere and then once at the end of your length. And if you hold shift, you'll select everything in between. That works with a lot of stuff. All right, so what I'm gonna do is select this range and kind of extend it out. So I said that was, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is gonna be 9. I'm gonna move it up to over here. And you'll notice that it then kind of extends it out even further. What I'm gonna do is create keyframes for each one of these. And remember your period and comma extend out. Your period and comma kind of scrub through your next frame. All right. So because I started all of these from this main frame, each keyframe is going to be the same in the same position. So what I'm going to do is just drag this out. Oh, that's right. My layer's locked. Here we go. I'll drag it out over here. Go down to this one. Drag it over. There we go. And I'll do the same thing for all of these, just to kind of get an idea of, where everything is. So this might take a little while. So let's see. So this will be frame 9, frame 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's pretty close. So what I'll do is, again, grab everything over here, and I might need to trim this down some. Extend it out. Let's see. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yep, okay. So again, I'm just adding keyframes. And if I keep clicking it, it'll just kind of push it forward. And so now you'll start to notice that this right here is really confusing because I have all these keyframes and I can't tell where my primary keyframes are. What you can do, and let me see if I can remember how to do this. There's a way to color your frames, I believe. So you can denote which ones are keyframes and which ones are not. Let me see if I can find that. So whenever I have a question, I always consult Google. Let's see. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'll look it up later. Let's see. All right. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do now, instead of using this squash ball, which I'm just going to delete all these because this ball shouldn't be squashed here anyways. And I'm going to go to my library and drag in the green ball here. So I'll put it right there where it needs to be. There you go. So now I'm going to go back. All right. And there we go. Looks about right. All right. And now I'm going to do the same thing right here with all of these frames. Let me figure out exactly how many frames I need, though. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm extending 2. and 6. There we go. And just creating keyframes through here that I will now extend. Make sure I'm in the right place. Have any of you guys done a ball bounce before or anything like this? Yes. Okay, cool. That's exciting. All right. Did you guys do it for a class or just do it for fun?
I just practiced it on Procreate on my iPad.
Okay, cool. All right. So that kind of fills in these spots. And now I'm going to do the same thing right over here. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, perfect. So I'm going to insert. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Delete it. There we go. And then add in keyframes. So if I delete something and then add in more keyframes off of that, they're all blank keyframes. All right, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. One more. All right, so now 1, 2, 3 here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll need to bring these back one. And if you notice, so I'm sliding this section forward and backwards. If I slide it backwards, and if you look over at frame 49, it's a keyframe now, but what it will do is extend that out. So I'm actually grabbing, if I undo that, I'm grabbing this blank frame and it's actually being moved over here. So I'm not really getting rid of anything. I'm just sliding things across and over. So again, what I can do is hover in here and make a blank keyframe. And that'll create that whole blank area. And then I'll just keyframe that in, blank keyframes again. So let's see. All right. And then it looks like maybe that's the middle. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I think that's what I have, which is less than I have over here. So we'll just add 4 and see what happens. And I can always extend these out too. Now, because I have these locked, probably won't let me. But now, another thing too, like what I'm about to do, you can grab things vertically up and down, like multiple layers at once, and extend them out too. Let's see. All right. That needs to come down a little bit. So I can tell right here, this is going to look really weird. So what I'm going to do is just kind of push it over to the right. There we go. Okay, so now what I'll do, and you know what? I'll maybe delete that. Oh, create a blank keyframe in here. There we go. And that doesn't need to be there. So now what I'll do is play through this, and we'll just see what it looks like. Okay, So that's a good start. And so what I'm using, like I said, is I'm just using these little tick marks that I made, and having that on your arcs early on will help you really get some good structure. Now you'll see right in this arc, this first arc, it kind of shoots out like a cannon, and then it feels like it kind of slows down here on these kind of other arcs. You also notice kind of up top at the peaks that it feels like it kind of hovers. Um, I'm noticing that it looks particularly on this side like it's kind of shooting straight down, maybe a little fast. So I'm thinking I could spread these out a little bit. This one feels all right. I feel like they might be a little too close up here. Or excuse me, yeah, maybe a little too close down in this section. So I could pull this one down a little bit, this one down a little bit. These actually maybe don't feel that bad. What I'm looking for is that it's not just hanging up in the air. You want it to kind of pause, but you don't want it to just float. And then with these, you don't want it to just shoot straight down. You want it to kind of ease in, but you definitely want it to pick up speed. Like I think I could probably add in a frame or two more up here, or especially in this top section. As of now, it just feels like it's being shot out. These feel more along what I want. But it does feel like it's kind of slowing down, especially on this second bounce or on this last bounce. So these are just some kind of initial, thoughts that I have on this. I'm not done with this. It needs some more refinement and cleanup. One other thing that I want to add in here are more like stretching. So I have my squash right where the ball touches the ground, and that's what I want to keep. I'm blocking these two again. But what I'm going to do is scrub through here, right here. And now I'm going to right click and transform, free transform. I'm going to stretch it a little bit like that and maybe rotate it just a hair. And if you have trouble, like if it's just not giving you enough in between, kind of snapping too much, what you can do is zoom in a little bit. See if that sometimes helps. I'll have to go back to transform. There we go. You have a little bit more kind of movement. So I'll do that. And it's a good thing to, like I was saying earlier, make your ball kind of hit the ground right when it stretches out like that. And then I'm going to go back one frame too. And right here, the ball should be stretching as well. So I'll just kind of stretch it a little bit, yeah, stretching. So I'm technically squashing it, but I'll pull it up a little bit too. There we go. And at this keyframe, I'll do the same thing, just a little bit slightly. So it's really about, zoom in a little bit. And if I scrub through here, this should be stretched out a little bit more too. It's about incrementing things very smallly each sequential frame. And if you've made something in a previous frame, you want to copy it in the other frame unless your ball is hitting a ground plane or it's changing its direction or its speed. So in this previous frame, I the sides and stretched it out. So I went back and stretched this out a little bit further. I think maybe right here, I could probably, what I'm going to do, spin it, squash it just a little bit. There we go. And so what I'm going to do now is do that for all of these kind of arcs. And if I scrub through here, it'll probably feel, I mean, that already, I know that's going to feel a little more natural. And I noticed that right there, as you can see that. So I want to change that. Just bring it down a little bit. Zoom in some, make sure. Perfect. So it might seem really nitpicky, but having that on there, it's really, really subtle things like that, that once it's done, the eye can kind of pick up on. And it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what frame it is, but weird things like that do kind of play an impact on the overall feeling of the animation. Like you might look at it and be like, something's a little off, but I can't put my finger on it. Chances are it might be something like that. What I'm just going to do is go in right around each ground point or impact point and clean up some of these squash and stretches. I'm going to stretch this one out a little bit. There we go. Rotate it. Squash it a little bit. And then squash this one just a little bit too. So you'll notice that I'm trying to keep this kind of axis line right here along this arc. The middle of the ball should be on this arc at all times. It looks like maybe this is a little off, but it's fine, I think. There we go. So just real subtle, not a whole lot, because I'm easing into it. And here, the ball should be, pretty round. And you'll notice here too, it looks like there's a little bump right here. I don't know if you guys can tell that. Can you guys see that between these three frames? And what I can do too, and I haven't used it yet, is turn on my onion skinning. And I'll just turn it on for the frame, one a frame ahead and one frame behind. And so what I'll do is try to just drop this down a little bit lower. And that's probably about right. Yeah, that feels a little more natural. And it's this stuff I'm not expecting you guys to necessarily see right off the bat, especially if this is your first time kind of animating. But this is one of the things that the more you start doing it, the more you'll see these things and the more you'll get better about noticing those really small, nuanced details. I think that's fine. Okay. All right. So now I'm looking at my frames, how far am I along from this kind of impact again? And I'll kind of work from the impact itself. So just like what I did over here, I want this ball to actually hit the ground. So I'm going to transform. I'm going to squash it. And this should be the most stretched ball at this point. So I'm going to stretch it out. And then I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to actually have it hit the ground. There we go. And I'm going to check on this one and make sure it's actually touching the ground plane a little bit high. So this is one of those things where if you're going to use the ground plane and you're going to use, precisely this line, you want to make sure that it's on that line every single time. And that's what I would recommend trying to do, because if you have this, I mean, even if this is I don't even know how many points along this is, probably not much. It's 11 points. Okay, that's a little chunky. But between that gap, if your ball hits on a different place every time, it's going to look a little off and a little strange and a little bit weird or inconsistent at the least. Oh, I really messed something up, didn't I? Oh, nope, never mind. Okay. So I'm just going back again. And I'm using the free transform tool. I'm going to rotate first. Again, make sure this point and this point are lined up as best along this arc. Not both of these will not always be on the arc, but you want this center point to be on it. And then I'm just going to squash it a little bit, stretch it just a little bit. There we go. And then go back to the one previous, line it up as best as I can, and just squash it some. And I think that'll be good. And so now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Remember, this is going to be my most extreme because it's one frame after impact. And actually, since this is my second full arc, my third arc, it doesn't need to be as extreme. All right. And just a little squash. There we go. Scrub through here and let's see. Impact. All right. So can you guys see? There's a couple things going wrong with this. As it is now, my ball is not necessarily falling. It's just sliding over to the right. Right? So what I'll do is this frame looks off. And this is something that I want you guys to be doing, is going through frame by frame, like looking at these points. Like if something looks wrong, if something kind of seems odd, then chances are it's off. But it's a simple fix. the biggest thing with animation, especially with the ball bounce, especially with like a first project like this, if this is any of your first kind of real projects in animation, is you'll get your layout, you'll do a first pass, and you need to come back several times afterwards just to clean up and make sure everything's as it should be. Because like I said, you know, if you're looking at this, you export it, you start looking at it, something might be off, and then you've got to go back in and figure out what it is and where it is and how to fix it. Make sure you're just doing that as you go. It's a tedious process, but once you get it figured out and once you isolate what the problem is, you can kind of fix it pretty easily. The fixes are all easy. So this is just about, there we go, moving it along. And so I can tell now that that looks way better. I mean, it looks like it's almost in the same position, but it's squashed. That's what I want. It doesn't feel like it's kind of sliding in from the left side anymore. And this is something that, you know, you can kind of get from your onion skin, but really, personally, I prefer just to kind of scrub through 2 frames. And remember, your period and comma go left and right. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just add some squash and stretch this. Make sure it's hitting right on that line. And if I scrub over here, I see that it's just overlapping. And that's what I was saying, you know, that's kind of weird. I don't like that. If I just hit it up 1 point, that kind of fixes it. All right. Then going back and just adding some more squash and stretch. And remember, these don't need to be as extreme because this arc is, you know, really small and the ball is starting to lose momentum here. All right. Go. So now I'm scrubbing between these two, and this seems a little off, and I think it might just be a matter of kind of rotating it a little bit more. Maybe the other way. Now that seems kind of odd too. I might have squashed too much here. Feels kind of strange. So I think that might maybe be pushed up a little bit. Might feel a little bit better. Let's see. Is this exciting? Is this fun to watch? And so I'm looking, something seems a little off right here. And I think it's maybe my rotation. We'll play it and see what it looks like. All right, let's see what we have. So something still looks a little strange right here, but you can tell now I'm getting an actual sense that this ball is stretching and squashing and bouncing in place. So can you tell that it seems a little bit more maybe lively, a little bit more kind of believable or realistic? And I'll turn off my arcs too. Oh. There we go. So that's a little more entertaining. So I think it definitely needs more tweaking. I think it comes out a little too fast here, so it's a matter of maybe inserting a few more frames. There's something wrong right here. It just seems really off. A little too stretchy.
It's just speeding back up over there at the end. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that's it. Maybe I just need frames. So yeah, if something looks like, especially on this side, if it looks like it's moving too fast, put in more frames. If it looks like it's getting stuck in space, like up in the middle right here and floating too long, take some frames out. Okay. I think, let's see. I can continue to work on it, but I might add a few more frames up here actually. So what I'll do is just grab all these, pull them over some, and let's see. Let's see. Maybe I'll add in a frame. Maybe one right here. Maybe right here. And maybe right here. That's 3 new frames. All right. All right. This is going to come back over here. Move new frame in there. Okay, so that needs to be right there. All right, let's see if this helps. I think it might still be a little fast right here. That might be part of the problem. Maybe I should add one right over here or something. Or maybe, oh, we'll just see what this looks like. And I'm still, let's see. I think it's just too much squash and stretch. Leave that one. We'll do these just regular. I think that one's maybe squash when it doesn't need to be too. There we go. All right, let's see what this looks like now. All right. So now, and that's kind of what I thought might happen. It's still too fast right here. It kind of slows and then it just shoots out. So then this would be a matter of going back in here and kind of reallocating where these frames are, maybe pushing some of these out into this space, spreading out these and kind of bringing these in a little bit closer. Let's see. I don't want to keep you guys all day, but we've still got 50 minutes on the clock. I'll maybe try and clean this up and we'll call it a day. Sound good to you guys? Okay, let's see. Just a hair. Okay. I'll go down to my arcs. And now, let's see. I'm going to use a brush. I'm actually going to use red now. My new points. So I'll keep this one here. And I'll keep that one. And that one. I think maybe that a little close. All right, we'll try that. And we'll leave that one where it is. So, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I think I'll get rid of 2 frames. So I'll delete that one. That one will stay. That will stay. Move this over just a little bit. That one will come over here. All right. We'll see what this looks like. And you see that I have this kind of blank frame in here. What I'll do is just right click and remove frames, and it will push everything together in on that. Let's see what we have now. Maybe this might have helped. Feels a little bit better. It definitely feels more consistent. It doesn't feel like it's slowing in and then being shot out of a cannon. It still feels maybe a little fast over here. This still feels a little odd. Maybe there's just too many frames in here. What do you guys think? Better? Worse?
Definitely an improvement.
Yeah.
I think it looks a little smoother.
Okay. So, anyways, this is the ball bounce. It's pretty simple as just the concept. Whenever you guys start digging around and playing in here, though, and getting everything structured and set up, it can become a little bit more, of a beast to tackle. What I want you guys to really do, first and foremost, though, and you guys have 2 weeks, about a week and a half, 2 weeks, to work on this. It's not due until next Sunday. What I want you guys to do first is, make your ground plane, figure out where your ball is going to be bouncing off of, and then make your arcs. That is going to be your first step. And then what I would highly recommend, you don't have to do it. You can do it whichever way is most comfortable for you. But because this is the way I showed you, this is how I do it. This is how I would recommend doing it. Map it out before you even put your balls down onto your scene. So figure out where exactly your notches are going to be, and you can put that on your arc layer, or you can make a new layer with just your notches. That way you can come in, and let's say if I did make all my notches, if I did make all my notches, I can come in here later if these aren't right, and I can select these and just slide them down. Whereas now, because I worked all on my arc board, if I try and select something and move it, it's going to grab the actual arc itself. That makes sense? Anyways, make your arc. You can use a pen tool. You can use the circles like I did, however you want. Just make sure they make sense. So each sequential arc is going to be shorter and shorter. And especially towards the end, they need to be really short. And your speed's going to be really low. So you're going to have more frames here than you do have here. So not every arc is going to have the same number of frames. Like this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Well, 13 between contact. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think that's why this one feels so strange, actually, because there's too many frames in there. And this one has, however many. This actually doesn't have that many because it's half, but let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that would be 18. So 18, 13, 10, and 8. So this should probably be more like maybe 6, maybe 7. I kind of want to go clean it up now, but anyways. So these are just kind of like, let's see, what's the best way to describe it? Kind of little notes and things to look out for. If you have more frames on this arc than you do in this arc or in the previous arc, then you have a problem. Start off with your keyframes, which are going to be your peaks and your contact points. Start with those first. Map those out. And then you're going to go in and try and figure out your in-betweens or your tweens, which are going to be these points right here in your arc. And remember that as the ball gets closer to the ground, it increases in speed. As it bounces up, it's going to have a lot of speed, but it's going to start slowing into this peak. So on the right side, you're going to be slowing out. On the left side, you're going to be slowing in. And it's all from this peak. Any other tips or guidance? Once you get this stuff down, keep going through, checking each individual frame, just like I was doing, and make sure that everything lines up. And again, you'll have to go through and do this kind of one-on-one, like side by side, to make sure, in some cases, particularly around here, that things are matching up and making sense. Another rule of thumb or something you want to kind of be aware of is right when the ball makes contact, it should be stretched out and it should touch down. Then it should squash. And then the next frame, it should be off of the ground. So you don't want to keep this frame on the ground, because if you do, I'll show you what it kind of looks like. It looks like it's just sticking to the ground. Right? It's kind of a weird little thing. So let's see. There we go. Whereas here, it feels a little more natural, like it's actually shooting up instead of just sticking and then elasticking off the ground. Anyways, that's those are two things you want to be aware of. So right before contact, it makes contact, squashes, and then shoots off. Shouldn't be on the ground anymore. So contact, squash, off the ground. Contact, squash, and off the ground. Yeah, that's where it is. That frame right there. And maybe that one too. All right, let's see. Now I'm curious. That looks better. Still funny. Anyways, this is a prime example of that I mean, you can get it done in an hour, but I would advise spending some more time with it and really kind of massaging it and kind of cleaning it up, refining it. You can keep working on these. And there is a reason this is a quintessential like animation practice or kind of exercise, because there are so many things kind of going on in this kind of simple ball bounce. And there are so many references to many of the principles of animation.